Personal Communication Skills, featuring Dr. Jim Hennig. Did you ever notice how some executives or corporate leaders are very effective in one-on-one communication, but hopelessly lost when it's time to address a large group? Or how others are comfortable in front of an audience, but have a difficult time selling their ideas to a small group of peers? Dr. Jim Hennig says that the single most underdeveloped leadership skill is the ability to speak and communicate effectively. Dr. Hennig is the author of the book, The Familiar Stranger, as well as the popular training program, Negotiating Your Success. And he is famed for his expertise in organizational change, communication, and leadership. Dr. Hennig combines personal experience with master's and doctoral degrees from Purdue University. He also has served as president of 4 corporations in widely diverse fields and has been a frequent and popular TV guest. Let's listen as Dr. Jim Hennig talks about personal communication skills.
Just how important are speaking and communication skills in your job performance? If you're like most managers, no skill is more important. Certainly, no skill is more visible than your ability to communicate. Whether it's a one-on-one conversation, a small departmental meeting, or a large group presentation to the entire company, or an important group of clients or potential customers, effective speaking skills are absolutely essential for managers. Your ability to communicate is also closely tied to other important managerial skills. Delegation, for instance, or motivating your people. Or what about managing change in that tremendously changing environment? None of these things can be effectively done without effective communication skills. In this section, we'll look at important communication principles and techniques in each of 7 areas to hone your existing speaking and communicating skills. Those 7 areas include know your audience, number 2, know your purpose, number 3, know and control your environment, number 4, preparing to speak, number 5, effective platform skills, that is, what are you going to do when you're actually on the platform, number 6, using feedback and evaluations effectively, and finally, number 7, controlling your nervousness. You'll each have an opportunity to internalize these principles and practice these skills in the follow-up section. Now, refer to your note-taking guide and feel free to add notes as ideas come to you as we look at each of these sections. Section number 1, know your audience. Here I suggest you follow the platinum rule rather than the golden rule in any communication. Now, we all know the golden rule, but Tony Alexander, in his book called The Platinum Rule, points out the platinum rule. Let's first look at the golden rule. The golden rule says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Where's the emphasis here? You see, it's on you. The platinum rule changes that just slightly. The platinum rule says, do unto others as they would have you do unto them. In other words, as far as the process of the communication is concerned, concentrate on the other party and make them feel comfortable. This means we might need to slow down at some times, or speed up, or handle it slightly differently to make them feel comfortable. Now, how else can we know our audiences, know the people that we communicate with? If you're speaking to a group, I suggest you talk to their leaders. Have a lot of questions for them. Find out about the details of that group so you can key into their needs. Another thing you can do is look at printed material. Is there anything that would help you in studying about that particular group? Or perhaps web research that would give you more information on that group. The more you know about the group, the better presentation you'll be able to make. Another thing that you can do is learn from the participants themselves. Sometimes I travel long distances to make presentations. I'm not able to mingle ahead of time, but I can make telephone calls. And I'll normally have a list of questions that I'll want to ask people that will key me into their important needs in relation to my topic. Another thing you can do is the same thing I did when we first came here. Do you remember? I mingled with any of those of you that I could. We developed a little bit of a relationship. I found a little bit out about you. That creates a bond and helps you connect with your audience. Another thing you can do is observe what goes before you in the presentation. You want to be able to relate to that and to build bridges between what has happened before and what you're doing now. Certainly understanding what has gone before will help you be a more effective communicator. Number two, know the purpose of your presentation. I would suggest that you have a single statement clearly defining what you want to accomplish with that presentation. Let me give you an example here. I have that for this presentation. My overall purpose is to improve communication and speaking skills by sharing principles in each of 7 different important areas. That's the specific purpose. I think, however, you need to go beyond that. Let's talk about behavioral objectives for each section. That's what the group will be able to know, to do, or to feel after hearing your presentation. I have 2 specific behavioral objectives for this portion of my presentation. Number 1, participants will be able to state in a single sentence the overall purpose of their talk. If you're able to accomplish that, I've accomplished my goal in that area. My second behavioral objective for this section is to have participants be able to state their behavioral objectives. That is, what the group will be able to know, do, or feel after the presentation. The third major area, let's talk about knowing and controlling your environment. It's extremely important. I mean, whether we're talking about a one-on-one situation or a group situation. For instance, Ted, in this situation, with me standing in front of you like this and standing above you here, who has the power in this particular situation? I do. But I might want to make Ted feel a little more comfortable in the situation. I could do that by simply coming down to his level, or even below him a little bit, and let him feel the power of the situation. You know, the same is true, actually, in any room environment situation. Let's assume that we're in an office environment, and let's assume that I've taken the position, in the power position, by the chair here, with a high-back chair, power. If you were sitting back there, Ted, this would be very much of a powerful situation for me. I could make you feel more comfortable by perhaps bringing you up to the chair here. Or if I wanted to make it even a more friendly environment, I could move that chair from there around to the side of the desk, and then there would be no desk in between us, and it would be much more comfortable. One other thing that we could do to control the environment in a one-on-one situation, I might get another chair, and rather than remaining behind the desk, come forward and sit with you on equal terms out there. You create the environment in one-on-one situations. Let's move from the one-on-one situation to basic room arrangements. There's a basic principle here that we want to think about when we're talking before any group. That basic principle is this: have the audience as close together and as close to you as possible. Now, if we look at various room arrangements here, let's assume we're in a long rectangular room. My question to you, thinking about our basic principle, is would we position the speaker here with the audience out this way, or would we position the speaker here with the audience out this way? Best answer to that is it would be best to position the speaker here, because that would enable us to arrange the people around that speaker in a manner like this. We could put rows out this way, and the farthest that a person would be away from the speaker in this position would be just back here. Much better situation. But quite frankly, that's not the best way to arrange that room. Remember we said we wanted to keep them as close as possible to the speaker? If we placed the speaker here, my suggestion would be to have them arranged in a herringbone fashion with no middle row, but then have the side rows slanted in like this. It's called a herringbone. Now, whether we're in a classroom situation, as you are here, with desks in front of you, or whether we're in a theater environment with no desks, simply depends upon whether you need to be writing. Each of you are taking notes now. This is a comfortable situation, so we're better off with that. If you didn't need to be writing, if it was more of a motivational presentation that I was providing for you, quite frankly, I would prefer you be in closer to me and we eliminate the tables. Keep people as close as possible. Another thing that you want to remember in room arrangements, let's assume that this room is set for 75 people, and you think there's probably only going to be 50 people attending. Strong suggestion here. In some way, block off or remove the chairs from the last rows, because that will keep people up closer to you. Notice this room, the intimacy of it, how close we all are. This creates the environment that we're looking for. Let's look at a couple other room arrangements. Let's assume that we've got a room like this, and let's consider a U-shaped arrangement there. Very effective arrangement with people sitting outside of the U around here for a presenter who can then move within this U and react with each individual on a one-on-one basis. And of course, each of you sitting around that table would be able to see everybody else and interact with everybody else in that room. One other room arrangement is circular tables, which normally I do not like, but sometimes are necessary at meal functions. The reason that I don't like them is it's so difficult for people sitting around those tables, and you can't get people close enough to you, and that becomes an important factor. Another thing you want to remember is always arrive early as the speaker for an event. You want to look at your various room arrangements and rearrange them if necessary. It'll make a big difference in your effectiveness as a speaker. One additional thing we want to consider is name tags. It's virtually impossible for you to learn the name of everybody in your audience, but you can make sure that name tags are made available, that they can either clip on or put around their neck, whatever would be appropriate. Notice how this one, from your level, is hard to read, but this one's got my first name very large, which enables you as a speaker to know virtually everybody in the room. Or you may want to use a tent card and simply place a tent card in front of the individual. Again, with the first name large so that you can do the interaction that you feel is necessary. How about lighting as a part of your environment? Extremely important, and the basic principle here is have as much light as you can possibly have, particularly upon you as the speaker. What happens when we don't have sufficient light? Do you see how much more lost I become up here? It's so important, and this is one of the things that you want to check ahead of time in that room. Have it as bright as possible. How about your dress? Again, there is a basic principle. Dress slightly upscale from your audience. If they're in rather casual attire, upscale that a bit. If they're in more formal attire, make sure that you're dressed at least as formally as the most formal person in that environment. And how about color? There's a reason I'm wearing what I'm wearing today. Dark blue for a man or a woman projects power, particularly with contrasting accessories. Notice the bright red tie there. Now that's if you want to project power. You may prefer to project warmth and friendliness. Ted is a good example of that. He's got a very earth tone colors on today, and that's warmth and that's friendly. And sometimes what you want to project in what you wear is warm and friendly. Select your clothes to accomplish what you want to accomplish. How about the introduction? It's extremely important, and if one is needed, who should prepare it? You should prepare it, because you want to accomplish a couple things with that introduction. You want to tell what qualifies you to speak to this particular group on this particular topic. The second thing that you want to do is to set the mood. As an example, in most of my introductions, I build a little humor in at the end because I want the audience to know that we're going to have fun in this presentation. How about the use of a lectern in speaking? Should you ever speak from behind a lectern, as I'm doing here? Well, you certainly can. It gives you the advantage of having notes here that you can refer to if you want to, but there are other disadvantages of that, and you may want to move out from that lectern. It's a more comfortable, it's a more relaxed environment as I move out here. You, to accomplish what you want to accomplish in your particular talk, need to decide whether you want to use a lectern or whether you want to be talking without that lectern, which may be a little bit more difficult for you in some situations. How about microphone types? Now, if we're speaking from behind a lectern, normally we have a microphone attached, and it's important that we use that properly, but it does limit us. So we may want to have a handheld mic that we can bring out and use this way. There is power in the use of a handheld mic, and you can feel very comfortable using it. Another thing that you can do with a handheld mic, it's very easy for me to vary my volume and speak very quietly into a handheld mic, but very difficult to do that with the lavalier mic. And yet the lavalier mic gives me other advantages. It enables me to move around. It enables me to adjust my audiovisual equipment, to use a flip chart or any of the other remaining things that we may want to do. It enables me to take my note-taking guide and refer to it if necessary. Let's talk about the fourth area, preparing to speak. It goes without saying that you need to have topic expertise. You need to understand your topic very well, and you need to be prepared effectively. I don't need to talk about that, but I do want to suggest that you start early in that preparation process so that you have the time to research, to gather your thoughts, to mold your thinking. Think about where you fit into the program, who precedes you and who follows you, and how you can bridge those gaps. Let's talk now about ways that you can prepare notes. There are actually 7 different ways that you can prepare notes. You can have it fully scripted. Now, I don't recommend that because there's a tendency to read when we do that. The second thing, and most common, is to outline or have key words so that you can look down and know where you are in that presentation. You've got it outlined. You've got something to follow. A third thing that you could do is to use a note-taking guide like I've prepared for you. Often I'll refer to this note-taking guide, and you can too. It gives you a cheat sheet, something that you're able to refer to remind you of the important things that you want to do. Another thing you could do is to have a flip chart. And you could have on that flip chart not only your outline and how you were taking people through it, but also small notes that you could see that would prompt you to remember stories that you wanted to use. Another way that you could do it is to use an overhead projector. The advantage of the overhead projector is that it allows you to pull out slides and overheads that you don't want to use and gives you that flexibility, which you don't have in the next method of slide presentation. Although that's a very excellent thing to use if you know that you're going to hit every single point that you want to hit. The final thing to use is a computer with it programmed in. In most of my presentations now, I'll use that. It allows great flexibility and great variation in what you are presenting, even being able to build video or other graphs and charts and everything else into that presentation. Probably the most important thing we can talk about are the 2 final things in your preparation process. I suggest that you visualize everything that you want to happen. Do you know that over the last couple of weeks, I've seen each of you sitting there watching my presentation as I practiced it and practiced it and practiced it. And you know what? You were almost as excited in that practicing as you are now. The power of visualization. Can you imagine the difference between an individual who says, I'm concerned about my presentation, and they worry, and they think about all the bad experiences they've ever had, and this is what passes through their mind. Contrast that with another presenter who has decided to use visualization positively and to practice positively. The wonderful thing about practicing before an imaginary audience is they always do exactly what you want them to do. See yourself doing that. It'll be a big step in making you an effective presenter. The fifth section, effective platform skills. What are you going to do now when we actually get on the platform? The most important thing I can tell you in this area is to have a powerful beginning and know what you're going to say in the beginning. Let me give you an example of that. Many years ago, when early in my speaking career, I decided to hand out the evaluation forms that I always use at the beginning. And about 1 to 2 minutes into every presentation for about a month, I said, would you take the pencil that's at your desk and rate me in all the areas on the evaluation form? And then I had to then put that away. At the end of the presentation, I asked everybody to use a pen then and do their final evaluation. My question to you is, how much difference was there in their evaluation after 1 or at the most 2 minutes and at the end of that 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour presentation? Interestingly enough, there was very little difference. People make their judgments quickly on you from the platform. Be sure you have a powerful beginning. And use attention getters, particularly at the beginning. For instance, when you first present yourself on the platform, using a pause can be very powerful. It says, I feel comfortable. And pauses other times in your presentations can also say, I feel very comfortable. Another thing that you can do is vary the rate, the pitch, or the tone. Sometimes you want to move very rapidly. Other times you want to slow up for emphasis. Or you may want your voice to be deeper or more powerful, or a little higher. Varying of tone, rate, and pitch can be very important. A third attention getter is remember the power of stories and examples. You know, I can almost see your eyes come alive when I begin to tell a particular story. People remember stories. If you can tie stories and examples to your major points, it makes a large difference in your effectiveness as a good speaker. Another thing that becomes extremely important is eye contact. You notice how I've tried to meet with everybody's eye at some time during the course of this presentation. And we need to pick different parts in the audience. And sometimes it's important to stay on one person for a little bit longer time than you think. That's a powerful technique. Eye contact says I care. And eye contact, of course, tells me what you're thinking about too, because I can see it in your face. Who should you not make eye contact with? I want you to know in every audience there are going to be people that don't seem to be paying attention. They may be, they may not be. Concentrate on the people that are giving you the responses you want to get in that audience. How about gestures and body movements? You've watched me move around on the platform, do different things. I think the most important thing I can say to you here is do what feels natural. Watch other people, imitate them if you want to, but do what feels comfortable for you. Body movements are extremely important, but also so are facial expressions. You tell an awful lot with what you say with your face. One additional thing we should talk about, and that's the size of your gestures. With a small group, they're going to tend to be very small. The larger the group becomes and the larger the room, the bigger your gestures need to become. And they'll feel very natural and they'll look very natural in that situation, but they need to be adjusted to the size of the group. Now, how do you stay on time in a presentation? What I do is I time each section of that presentation. And I know where I am and I know where I need to finish, and I use my own watch here. Sometimes when I bring my hand up here, I'm taking a quick look at that to see where I stand. But I also know in my notes or in my thinking where I need to be so that I can adjust, add a little bit more, pull a little bit more out, so that I don't cut off that powerful closing that can be so effective. How about audience participation? The more you can get the audience involved, the better, whether it be through questions, comments, interactions. But of course, there are dangers to that. You want to be very careful of somebody monopolizing the presentation or taking you in a direction that you don't want to be taken. If you're answering questions, you may want them submitted in a written form so you can select the questions that you want. Think ahead of time about how you want to control the audience participation. Finally, have a powerful ending. Have that back-timed so that you never get rushed in your conclusion, so that you can accomplish what you want to accomplish. Let's move to that sixth important area, using feedback and evaluations. Interesting story. Just recently, one of our top professional speakers in one of our National Speakers Association meetings said evaluations are so important to him, and he has always been involved in a Toastmasters club. Now, Toastmasters is an international organization, so they have them in virtually all of your countries. I strongly encourage you to join a Toastmasters club where you can practice and get evaluations, because I've seen even the top professional speakers using coaches, using others to help them, gathering written evaluations and feedbacks, because people will tell you what they liked and what they didn't like, particularly if you prompt them on your evaluation form. I love the question, what did you like best about my presentation? And also, what would you change about the presentation, or what did you like least? Forcing them to give you some constructive criticism in the process of your improving your presentation skills. Let's talk about the final section, controlling your nervousness. Now, I don't know about you, but I know some studies that have proven that standing up before a group is one of the most frightful things that you can possibly do. Here are 4 suggestions to overcome your nervousness. First of all, I suggest you over-prepare. Start early enough and make sure you are prepared. When you are prepared, you need not fear. Secondly, practice. Practice does wonders. The audience always reacts when I'm speaking to an imaginary audience exactly the way I want them to react. And you know what? Most often, when I practice enough using that technique, the real audience responds exactly the same way. Third, give positive expectations and visualization. In other words, see yourself doing exactly what you want to accomplish. See yourself making the gestures. See yourself making the points. See yourself communicating the way you need to communicate in that environment. But the 4th suggestion is the most important one. Lose yourself in your purpose. The only reason for anyone to become afraid on the platform is because they're concentrating on themselves. We need to concentrate on our audience and our purpose. What do we want to accomplish? If you lose yourself in your purpose, it doesn't matter what else happens. Now, we've talked about 7 important areas that I know each of us can improve in. And it's a constant process. And even though I've been in the business of speaking for almost 2 decades now, I know I learn with every presentation and every feedback. I had an interesting experience a number of years ago. My family gave a presentation, all of my 5 kids at the time, to the National Speakers Association. My little 10-year-old son, Troy, came up to me after that presentation. He said, "Dad, this was great." He says, "Sometime I'm going to come back to this organization and present all by myself." I thought, "Oh no, Troy, that's not going to happen, at least not in the near future." But 2 years later, somehow, that little 12-year-old then, Troy, was presenting before the entire General Assembly of the National Speakers Association. More than 1,000 professional speakers. I thought, "Oh my goodness, I'm nervous. I've never even done that. And now I've got a 12-year-old son who's doing it." But Troy was just the opposite. He had prepared in every area that we've talked about today. And most of all, he had seen himself presenting effectively. I remember him telling me when I was expressing concern to him, he said, "No, Dad, when I finish, I'm going to get a standing ovation." What happened when Troy finished that day? More than 1,000 professional speakers jumped to their feet and gave him a standing ovation. Why did Troy get a standing ovation? Because he mastered the 7 important areas of effective speaking. Number 1, know your audience. Number 2, know your purpose. Number 3, know and control your environment. Number 4, prepare. Number 5, use effective platform skills. Number 6, use feedback and evaluations. And number 7, control your nervousness. Just like Troy did, you can do it too. Be yourself. Find that within you that makes you a great speaker. And you too will be more effective in connecting and communicating with your audiences.